let's talk about seeking and wanting, the difference between seeking and wanting. So sometimes I think that I go way too fast for people and I have to go back a bit. Sometimes I want to speak about everything all in one go. It's like, slow down, Lisa, slow down, slowly. So all there is this, and this is freedom. What is? And what is empty and full simultaneously. That's really weird. If you've just come to these talks, you're like, what? It's empty and full. But what is? Life isn't happening to someone. Maybe that's more understandable. You think it's happening to you, but it's actually not happening to somebody. Nobody owns this life. That somebody that you think that you are is being experienced. And there's something experiencing that. And that which is experiencing the person isn't a thing. And by not being a thing, by default, it's everything. So let's come back again. So we go back again. I keep wanting to go too fast. So who is it that you think you are right now? Who are you? I remember when my friend, I was about 22, and he used to point his finger at me and say, who is the pom pom pom? Who is the finger pointing to? And I would be internally like, me, who else? And I'd just be like, to him. He'd be like, who's the finger pointing to? Me. So who is this finger pointing to? So who is the one that thinks that they're sitting at a computer listening to Lisa? Who is that? So notice that in your experience there is a story running. There is a story of you running in your life and what you have and what you don't have. What you want, where you want to get to. But notice that you see all those thoughts. So those thoughts which you are seeing about you are not an experiencer, but something which is experienced. So who is the experiencer? Because the story about who you are isn't the experiencer. And the way you know that is because it's being experienced. So a thought arises that I walked into this room, I sat down on the chair, I turned on the computer, I decided to listen to Lisa, I decided to make myself a drink, I'm going to browse the internet at the same time, I'm also going to watch Muji, I'm going to do it all in one go. And the story is telling you that that person is an experiencer. But that story is something that's been watched. The very experience of it, so the act of you looking at the computer, the act of sitting down, is happening right now. But the story about you doing it is also happening right now, but is a story playing that's being watched. You know that story about yourself. So when you think about the fact that you walked into this room, you sat down, you're thinking about that now, you're imagining it, and there's something that's experiencing that. Who is that? Who? Who let the dogs out? Who? Here she comes. Here she comes. Here she comes. Oh, there she is. You beep doopy doopy doop. Boopy doopy doopy doop. Got a good girl. So that story of you is being experienced. So maybe you now had thoughts about Khaleesi or about what just happened. Like, Lisa, you're in the middle of explaining something profound and then you start acting like a child. Who do you think you are? So that's a judgment coming up about me. Who is experiencing that? Because that judgment isn't who you are. That thought isn't who you are, isn't the experiencer. It's an experience. What happens in most people is we have like these suction pads inside us that suck in all these events, like so you suck in the fact that you sat down and watched this, and then you suck in the idea that you're annoyed with me, or that you're absolutely loving me, and you hold it inside yourself. And this goes on since maybe you were like, let's say 2, 3, 4, you began to suck in things. So maybe at 4 years old, I think I was a little bit of a late starter, a late bloomer. So I don't think I started sucking in so early. I struggled with language, which is quite hard to believe because I am quite the talker. I talk quite a lot. And at I also am very quiet if I'm not interested in the subject. But if I'm interested, then I'm quite chatty. So, but I struggled to formulate words and to speak. And I remember at about 3 or 4 years old, they thought they were going to have to send me to special needs school. And they kept telling me I had to say my name and I had to write my name. And I remember writing it, Lisa. And I remember thinking, that's who I am. And I remember feeling when I did that, this sadness. I felt like if I didn't do it, I didn't become part of the human world. And so this became my first sucker. I went, Lisa, that's who I am. And then the experiencer, which is no thing, and this idea of Lisa, almost it's as if they joined. It's like suddenly consciousness, who I am, the no thingness, the experiencer, suddenly became form. Even though it can't really become form, it felt like it became something separate from all other things. Where really everything's appearing in consciousness, and consciousness is expansive and huge and endless. That it suddenly felt like consciousness became smaller. And then I got ideas about myself. So I got this really crazy idea that I was stupid. Because at school I was put in the corner. My mum tells me I was put in the corner like a dunce. So I was just left in the corner all day at school. I don't remember that. I remember it differently. I remember that the teachers didn't bug me and that I would build these books up and then play. But I do remember being scared and not wanting to go into school. I was also put on the table with the naughty children. And I wasn't really naughty at that time. I was as I got older. With the children that were always in trouble. And so I sucked in this idea that I was stupid. And it's not actually till last year that my mother actually told me that when they got my IQ tested, it was high intelligence. I'd never been told that before. She used to tell people it was average, or just slightly above average, and then for some reason they told me that last year. So I sucked in this idea that I wasn't intelligent, I was stupid. And I also sucked in another idea because I always befriended the most intelligent child in the class. So I always had the intelligent friend and I was the stupid one. And I used to suck information out of them because I couldn't read it in books. I would suck the information. And then later on I developed the idea that I thought I was emotionally intelligent, and that's why I befriended the intelligent kid, because it was what I lacked. And then later discovered it was because they stimulated me and excited me, because I was also intelligent. That took me a long time to work out, but it sucked it in. And that was a big identity of mine, that I was stupid and I couldn't do things. It really affected me. I always assumed that other people knew better than me, and I sucked in low self-esteem, and it even affected my body and the way I held my body. It affected my conversations, it affected my relationships, and I formed an identity. I also formed an identity that I was super creative, because that's what the school taught me. I also sucked in the idea that I was good at sport. I sucked in so many ideas that I was white, blonde, plumpy. I was a plumpy child. English, an age, and all of it became this fake skin that I wore. All these things were stuck with consciousness and the I am. They were solidified to the consciousness and the I am. So it made it feel like consciousness and the I am and who I was a separate entity. I didn't know anything about consciousness, but I felt like I was this soul inside the body. That was another thing I thought I was I thought I was a soul. And then I became practicing Buddhist, and I sucked that in. And I remember wanting to wear spiritual clothes and beads and decorate myself in a Buddhist way, although there wasn't a particularly Buddhist way. I then identified with non-duality. And the whole time though, when I identified with the Buddhist and when I identified with the non-duality, other ideas were being let go of. They were like, they were expanding back out. And then eventually what happens, and it will happen to everyone that follows this subject, is that a crack happens. Suddenly it's seen that that person isn't experiencing life. It's being experienced. And this is what's called an awakening. And it's super profound. It's like, there is something experiencing the person. And then you can get loved up in that idea for a while, so then you suck that idea in. And it's not so much that you have to change. So you'll still have your personality or your quirks because you've been conditioned that way. This body is conditioned that in that dynamic. It might relax them a lot, but it's that the energy stops being sucked inside the body. Consciousness and the I am stop being sucked inside the body. They go back to everything. And this identification breaks. And it's mysterious how it happens. Thousands of people have tried to put it into words and make a path, but nobody's really quite cracked it yet. Otherwise, the whole of humanity would be enlightened. It's mysterious how it happens, and it seems to be different for everyone. It's like everyone's got their unique individual path and process. And I would still say that my personality is growing more and more into that. Like my personality is changing the last 7-8 years since this big shift, and even since the first initial awakening in my 20s, this personality is, when I say the personality, I mean the genetics and the conditioning, I suppose. The way this body operates becomes more and more expansive, and that seems like an endless dance. If the person doesn't become liberated, there's no point that the person becomes liberated, because the person doesn't exist. But the person, it's almost as if, can endlessly expand to that realization. So always stay humble to that, always on the human level, be open to expanding more. It seems like the happy, balanced personality is one that isn't rigid with ideas and is open to possibility and mystery. And opening to change. So before you know what home is, before that happens, there is this seeking energy. So before the crack happens, after the initial crack happens, it normally goes in and out, this seeking energy. And the seeking energy is always looking for home in things, so it's looking for that expansiveness, who you truly are in things. It can look for it in money, sex, homes, children, lovers, attention, success, peace, superiority. Can do it in all these things, look for it in all these things. And what it's looking for is itself. The seeker is always agitated, never can truly rest. But I suspect that a lot of you go in and out of that. A lot of you have had awakenings, and there is a going in and out of that. Sorry, I'm getting mesmerized by the trees. The way they're blowing, it's so beautiful. That's all yourself. Everything that you see is yourself. It's all moving within yourself. Then you've got wanting. And wanting to me, so remember that all speakers speak about this in a different way. Wanting is the way that consciousness, or the mysterious self, is orchestrating this body. So wanting is natural, and it's like wanting to eat your dinner, wanting to connect with other people, but not because you're believing, not because there's this underlying current, even though you might not be conscious of it, of trying to get home in them. A seeking energy is a different energy. The sensation of trying to find home in something. It's just the way life is orchestrating this. And the wants manifest through feeling and through thought. So it can just purely be a feeling and this hunger and this movement towards food, or it can be a thought and a feeling. And we're never taught about these natural wants. But this is God, the big I, who you truly are, speaking. It's doing it now with everything that you do. So in me, in my body, there's a want to express this. So it gets expressed. There's such love for expressing this. There's such love for this subject. So it gets expressed twice a week and in personal sessions. I love it. I could talk about this endlessly. It's so beautiful. There's also a want in me to nurture. So I have a dog. As children haven't manifested, I have a dog which I nurture. And I love it. I love it. I had a want for a home and garden. Now, and there was a movement towards that, and now there is a home and a garden. I wanted Khaleesi particularly to have a garden, but also me, but particularly Khaleesi. This dog should have a garden. I wanted to be in nature, so that's what the body's moved towards. And sometimes we're conscious of these wants, and sometimes we're not so conscious of them. I want to express love to people, and sometimes I'm not always so conscious of that. That's a big want. And they're not anybody's want. And you're not trying to get home from them. Obviously there's an objective. Every animal has objectives. But they don't provide home. This is home. This. And then the way it works is through life having these wants. And the way we've been conditioned, so our conditioned minds can sometimes fight against these wants. And this can be seeking or it can't. If you're in seeking energy, then you fight against the wants, and you're afraid that they're going to take you out of home, so it becomes very desperate. But if it's not seeking energy, it just can be conditioning that people, society have told you that you're not allowed things or you shouldn't do that. And so the body's been trained to move away from those wants. And one thing that I've noticed over the years is that you expand more and more with those wants. You allow life and you trust life. Like the reconditioning is to trust life. And this really is beautiful because we're always trained in our brains that we have to put a lot of effort into life to work it out and to do it. And you really don't. You just have to wait for the urges to arise. I used to feel after the awakening that the internal reality and the external reality hadn't quite lined up yet. Like it's taken a lot of time for there to be a reconditioning in my body to really let those wants manifest, to really allow them. At first, this body wasn't so used to that, so it took time for the internal and external reality to match up. And it taught me again and again, you have to really allow these wants to come through. And they're not seeking. Seeking contains hatred and greediness and rejection and dislike. These wants are expansive, so when you say it, I want a new table, it doesn't come from lack, it comes from a feeling of expansion. When the seeking energy is there, it comes from lack, from need, from rejection. But when the wants are aligned, they come from an expansive, pleasant place. Not always, there's always exceptions to everything, because our words never quite fit the experience. And from this way, on the human level, it becomes very peaceful. Not always, life has a way of bouncing around, but the life becomes more peaceful because it flows. There's just a following of the flow. Seeking is a resistance almost. It's a resistance of life. It's afraid of what it wants. It's lackful. And all you have to do is follow what life wants, which is this expansiveness. And that can sometimes take some reconditioning because the mind is conditioned to believe certain things. So when you have a want that's expansive and like growth, and then thoughts come up, negating that or saying you can't, just notice that. And that's not true. You don't even have to do anything to get what you want. You just have to acknowledge it and be in line with it and allow it. Often we're rejecting it. Oh, I can't do that because this person wouldn't like it. I can't do that because this would happen. You just have to line up with it and be in this mystery, so the want comes up and then you don't know what's going to happen. But you're not desperately in the background, I must have it. Just letting it happen.